Welcome back to Restoring British Health, the investigative podcast that pulls apart what's really in our food, our water, and our supply chain. Picture this. Tomorrow morning, in roughly 8 million British households, the same ritual will take place. A child fills a bowl with processed cereal, pours on milk, eats. The whole sequence, start to finish, takes less than 5 minutes. Most parents consider it wholesome. Most children consider it normal. And in those 5 minutes, that child may consume more sugar than is in a chocolate biscuit. Grain that has been stripped of virtually all natural nutrition by industrial extrusion. Milk from cattle fed on pesticide-treated grain and water carrying traces of lead, PFAS microplastics, and pharmaceutical residues. The cereal itself may carry residues of glyphosate, chlormequat, and pirimiphos-methyl. It will almost certainly contain acrylamide, a probable carcinogen formed during high-temperature processing. And every single element of that meal will have been marketed not to the parent, but to the child, through decades of cartoon mascots, toy promotions, and psychological targeting so sophisticated it would be regulated out of existence in Chile, in Mexico, or in Scandinavia. This is not a single product failure. This is the convergence point of every systemic failure I have documented in this series so far. Ultra-processed grain, contaminated water, industrialized milk, pesticide residues, excessive sugar, and relentless advertising aimed at the people least equipped to resist it. A bowl of cereal is the British food system in miniature. And consider this. In England right now, 22% of children in Year 6 are classified as obese. In the most deprived areas, that figure approaches 30%. Tooth decay is the leading cause of elective hospital admission for children in this country, costing the NHS approximately £33 million a year in hospital admissions alone. Type 2 diabetes, often so exclusively an adult condition that it was literally called adult onset diabetes, is now being diagnosed in British children at rates that would have been unthinkable just one generation ago. Cereal isn't the sole cause, but it is the most concentrated expression of the crisis, the most emblematic product, and the most protected industry. So let's look at what is actually in the bowl. Now, the story of breakfast cereal begins improbably with a health mission. In the late 19th century, a man called Dr. John Harvey Kellogg, a Seventh-day Adventist physician running the Battle Creek Sanitarium in Michigan, developed grain-based foods as part of a regime he believed would promote digestive health and moral temperance. His brother, Will Keith Kellogg, recognized the commercial potential. Founded the Kellogg Company in 1906. The original intent was to replace the heavy meat-laden Victorian breakfast with something lighter and more nourishing. And what followed, frankly, is one of the most complete betrayals of a founding principle in the history of food manufacturing. Within decades, breakfast cereal had transformed from a health product into a sugar delivery mechanism, packaged in a health claim. Manufactured through a process that would render the original Kellogg brothers unrecognizable to their own invention. That process is called extrusion. Virtually all boxed breakfast cereals, from Cocoa Pops to Weetabix Minis, from Cheerios to the organic granola clusters sold in your local health food shop, are manufactured using some form of extrusion cooking. Here's how it works. The raw ingredients, typically a slurry of grain flour, sugar, water, and flavorings, are fed into an extruder, a machine that subjects them to extreme temperature, often exceeding 150 degrees Celsius and sometimes reaching 200 degrees. Extreme pressure is added, an intense mechanical shear force. The mixture is forced through a die that determines the final shape of the product. A blade then slices each piece as it emerges, and then those pieces are sprayed with a coating of oil and sugar to maintain crunch and prevent the cereal from immediately dissolving in milk. This process is brutally efficient, continuous, fast, cheap. It transforms a penny's worth of grain into a product that retails for several pounds per box. Profit margins that few other food categories can even match. It is also nutritionally devastating. Peer-reviewed research has documented that extrusion cooking partially destroys heat-sensitive vitamins. Vitamin A, the B group vitamins, vitamin C, vitamin E. Retention rates in B vitamins in long barrel extruders can fall as low as 20%. That means 80% of the vitamin is being destroyed by the process. The essential amino acid lysine is particularly vulnerable to denaturation through what's called Maillard reactions, which occurs when proteins react with sugars under high heat. The process gelatinizes starch, increasing the glycemic index of the final product, creating a food more likely to cause rapid blood sugar spikes. Carotenoids and other bioactive compounds with antioxidant properties are also degraded. Protein structures are fundamentally altered. Now, the scientific literature on extrusion is extensive, but it is almost entirely focused on optimizing process parameters for texture, shelf life, and cost efficiency. Studies examining the health consequences of consuming extruded grain as opposed to the whole or minimally processed grain are conspicuously absent from major peer-reviewed journals. The cereal industry funds enormous quantities of research into breakfast and cognitive performance, breakfast and weight management, breakfast and nutrient intake. It funds almost nothing into what extrusion does to the nutritional value of the product it sells. Now, there are two frequently cited but unpublished studies that provide a disturbing counterpoint. The first, described by Paul Stitt in his book Fighting the Food Giants, allegedly involved 4 groups of rats maintained by a cereal company. One group received whole wheat, water, and synthetic vitamins. A second received puffed wheat in extruded cereal with water and the same vitamin solution. A third received only white sugar and water. A fourth received only water and vitamins. The whole wheat group survived for over a year. The water and vitamin group survived approximately 2 months. The sugar and water group survived about a month. The puffed wheat group, they died within 2 weeks, before the group receiving no food at all. A second study, attributed to the University of Michigan, reportedly found that rats fed exclusively on cornflakes died of malnutrition before a control group fed on the cardboard box the cereal came in. Now, full caveat, these studies have not been formally published. They must be treated with appropriate caution. I'm not presenting them as definitive science, but their very unpublished status raises its own questions. In an industry generating billions in annual revenue, the absence of controlled feeding studies comparing extruded and unextruded grain in any peer-reviewed journal is not a gap in the research, it is a wall. Now let's look at the sugar. Kellogg's Frosties contains 37 grams of sugar per 100 grams of product. Again, more than a third of the product by weight is sugar. A 30-gram serving, the manufacturer's recommended portion, delivers 11.1 grams of sugar before a single drop of milk is added. Now, to put that into perspective, a digestive biscuit contains approximately 2.5 grams of sugar. A child eating a bowl of Frosties at the recommended portion size consumes the sugar equivalent of more than 4 digestive biscuits. And in practice, almost no child eats just 30 grams. Independent surveys consistently find real-world portion sizes exceed manufacturer recommendations by 50 to 100%. Cocoa Pops, Kellogg's best-selling children's cereal in the UK, historically contained 35 grams of sugar per 100 grams. Following sustained public pressure and the threat of HFSS advertising restrictions, Kellogg's reduced this to 17 grams per 100 between 2017 and 2018. A reduction the company marketed extensively, and quite rightly took credit for. But supermarket own brand equivalents, the ones that lower income families are more likely to buy, frequently remain at or near the original 35% sugar level. Kellogg's Crunchy Nut Cornflakes still delivers 11 grams of sugar per 30-gram serving. Sugar Puffs, now rebranded as Honey Monster Puffs, historically exceeded 30% sugar. A study published in the British Dental Journal examined 9 of the most popular breakfast cereals marketed to children in the UK. They found that 4 of them, including Frosties, Cocoa Pops, and Crunchy Nut Cornflakes, contained sugar levels classified as high under EU reference intake standards, above 22.5%. Only Weetabix, at 4.4% sugar, was classified as low. Globally, World Action on Salt and Health found that over half of the 19 cereals it surveyed across 29 countries contained enough sugar in a single 30-gram serving to account for half the recommended daily free sugar intake of a 3-year-old child. And the consequences are visible in every NHS dental and paediatric clinic in this country. In England, nearly 90% of tooth extractions in young children are caused by decay. Dental extraction under general anaesthetic remains the most common reason for elective hospital admission of children. This costs the NHS approximately £33 million per year, and resulting in an estimated 60,000 missed school days every single year. A Cambridge University study estimated that the soft drinks industry levy alone may have prevented around 5,500 hospital admissions for child tooth extractions per year. No equivalent levy applies to breakfast cereals. Tony the Tiger was introduced in 1952. The Cocoa Pops monkey arrived in 1986. The Honey Monster has been selling sugar puffs since 1976. For over 70 years, the breakfast cereal industry has directed its most sophisticated marketing at the demographic least equipped to evaluate it: children. And the strategy is not subtle. Cartoon mascots create brand loyalty before children can even read a nutritional label. Toy promotions embedded in cereal boxes create a direct association between processed food and reward. Television advertising during children's programming at its peak saturated young audiences with messaging designed to exploit what psychologists call pester power, the ability of a child's repeated requests to influence parental purchasing decisions. And the cereal aisle in any British supermarket is designed at child eye level. Bright colours, cartoon characters, child-friendly language, positioned precisely where a 4-year-old will see them. Now, in 2007, the UK introduced restrictions on HFSS advertising in children's media. They banned such advertising during programs made for children or likely to have a disproportionately high child audience. The industry simply adapted. Digital marketing, influencer partnerships, advergaming, which is online games built around cereal brands, sponsorship of children's activities, all of it providing routes around the television restrictions. And critically, school breakfast clubs, many of them supplied with branded cereal by the manufacturers themselves, placing the product directly into the daily routine of the most vulnerable children under the institutional imprimatur of the school. And in 2022, in a landmark High Court case, the court ruled that cereal products could not be exempted from the HFSS location restrictions just because they are consumed with milk. Kellogg's had been arguing that adding milk improved the nutritional profile sufficiently to take its products out of that category. Thankfully, the court disagreed. They found that milk does not alter the nutritional profile of the products themselves. The ruling was significant, but it addressed only in-store placement. The broader apparatus of child-directed marketing, the mascots, the branding, the digital engagement, all of it remains largely intact. Now compare that with Chile. In 2016, Chile passed the law of food labeling and advertising. It mandated black octagonal warning labels on the front of all products high in sugar, calories, sodium, or saturated fat. It banned the use of cartoon mascots on any product carrying a warning label. It prohibited advertising of these products on television between 6 a.m. and 10 p.m. in cinemas, in any location with high child attendance, and it banned the sale or free distribution of ultra-processed products in schools and nurseries. And the result? Documented in peer-reviewed studies. A 25% reduction in sugary drink consumption within just 2 years, and a measurable shift in purchasing behavior led remarkably by children themselves, who began policing their parents' shopping choices based on the warning labels. Mexico followed, banning cartoon mascots from any product carrying a warning label under its NOM-051 standard. The country's Consumer Protection Agency seized 380,000 boxes of Kellogg's cereal for non-compliance. Tony the Tiger was removed from Frosty's boxes. In the UK, Tony remains. Cocoa remains. The Honey Monster remains. The voluntary, industry-led approach to restricting child-directed marketing has produced the outcome that voluntary, industry-led approaches always produce: the minimum change necessary to avoid regulation, accompanied by maximum public relations expenditure to create the impression of progress. Now, viewers who watched the bread episode will already know about pre-harvest spraying of cereal with glyphosate. The same crops processed through the same supply chains provide the raw material for breakfast cereals. Every argument I made in episode 5 about glyphosate exposure applies with equal force here, compounded by the fact that children consume proportionally more cereal per kilogram of body weight than adults do. The Environmental Working Group in the United States has conducted multiple rounds of independent testing on oat-based cereal products since 2018. In their initial tests, glyphosate was detected in 43 of 45 conventionally grown oat-based cereals marketed to children. Subsequent rounds found glyphosate in all 28 samples of conventionally grown oat products, with levels in some Quaker products reaching 2,837 parts per billion. That's nearly 18 times the EWG's health benchmark of 160 parts per billion. In the UK, Dr. Rosemary Mason, a retired physician and former assistant editor of the journal Anesthesia, independently tested 4 popular UK oat-based cereals. She found glyphosate in all 4, including Quaker Oats at approximately 499 parts per billion. And the UK's legal maximum residue level for glyphosate in oats is 20 milligrams per kilogram. That's 20,000 parts per billion, vastly higher than the EWG's health benchmark. So the gap between what is legally permitted and what independent scientists consider safe for daily consumption, particularly by children, is enormous. And glyphosate is not the only pesticide of concern. Chlormequat, a plant growth regulator used extensively on British oat and wheat crops to prevent the grain from bending. They call it lodging. Chlormequat has been found in 92% of non-organic oat-based foods tested. A 2024 peer-reviewed study found chlormequat in the urine of 80% of people tested, with detection rates rising from 69% in 2017 to 90% in 2023. Animal studies have linked chlormequat to reduced fertility, altered fetal growth, delayed puberty, and reproductive system damage. And then there's pirimiphos-methyl, an organophosphate insecticide used as a post-harvest grain storage treatment. Another regular finding in UK pesticide residue testing of cereals. These compounds are individually assessed for safety against maximum residue levels. They are almost never assessed in combination, despite a fact that the child eating the bowl of cereal is simultaneously exposed to glyphosate, chlormequat, pirimiphos-methyl, and whatever other residues happen to be present in that particular batch of grain. The cocktail effect remains one of the largest blind spots in pesticide regulation, and it falls most heavily on the smallest bodies. Now, what your child is pouring onto that cereal has changed as profoundly as the cereal itself. The majority of UK milk is produced by high-yield Holstein Friesian cattle, bred and managed for maximum output. These animals typically produce between 7,000 and 10,000 litres per lactation, roughly double the output of traditional breeds. And to sustain that output, they're fed diets high in concentrated grain feed, much of it treated with the same pesticides documented in the previous section. Their confinement in intensive systems for significant portions of the year limits their access to pasture, and the nutritional consequences of this production system are measurable. Peer-reviewed research has consistently demonstrated that milk from pasture-fed cattle contains significantly higher levels of omega-3 fatty acids, conjugated linoleic acid, fat-soluble vitamins including vitamins A and E than milk from grain-fed, intensively managed herds. The ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 fatty acids, which is a key indicator of inflammatory potential, is markedly less favorable in conventionally produced milk. So a child eating cereal with conventional supermarket milk is receiving a nutritionally inferior product, compared with what would have been available from a traditional mixed farming dairy herd. Now, antibiotic use in the UK dairy herd, while subject to stricter regulation in the United States, where recombinant bovine somatotropin is permitted, remains substantial. The UK banned antibiotics as growth promoters in 2006, and routine testing finds antibiotic residues in retail milk samples generally fall below maximum residue levels. The systemic concern, however, is not residues in individual milk samples. It is the contribution of agricultural antibiotic use to antimicrobial resistance, a threat that the UK government's own O'Neill review estimated could cause 10 million deaths per year globally by 2050, if left unaddressed. And industrially produced milk is a fundamentally different product from the milk consumed by previous generations. It is thinner, less nutrient dense, produced under conditions that prioritize volume over quality. The picture of green fields on the carton has, for the most of UK milk production, become a marketing fiction. And then there's the water, which connects this episode directly back to episode 3. That episode documented the presence of PFAS, the so-called forever chemicals, lead leaching from Victorian-era pipes, microplastics, and pharmaceutical residues, including antidepressants, contraceptive hormones, and chemotherapy metabolites, all present in British drinking water. Every one of those contaminants is present in the water used to manufacture cereal at industrial scale, in the water used by families to make porridge, and in the water that reconstitutes infant formula mixed into cereal for the very youngest children. The relevance to breakfast cereal is both direct and indirect. Directly, water is used in the manufacturing process itself, in the preparation of the grain slurry that enters the extruder, in cleaning, in processing, in the production of the milk that accompanies the cereal. Indirectly, families using tap water to prepare porridge or instant oatmeal, often considered the healthier cereal alternative, are cooking their children's breakfast in water that no regulatory body can guarantee is free from these contaminants. PFAS are of particular concern because they are persistent, bioaccumulative, associated with immunotoxicity, endocrine disruption, liver damage, and certain cancers. Children's developing systems are more vulnerable to these effects than adult bodies. So a child consuming cereal with milk and water is receiving a combined dose of whatever PFAS, lead, microplastics, and pharmaceutical residues are present in their local water supply, on top of whatever pesticide residues are present in the cereal and the milk. And no regulator assesses this combined exposure. No safety limit accounts for it. The child's body must process the full cocktail unaided. Pick up any box of children's cereal, turn it to the side panel, and you'll find a list of vitamins and minerals that reads like a nutritional supplement. Niacin, iron, vitamin B6, riboflavin, thiamine, folic acid, vitamin D, vitamin B12, and the implication reinforced by decades of marketing is that the cereal is a significant source of essential nutrients. The reality is the opposite. The cereal is fortified precisely because the extrusion process has destroyed the natural nutrients that were present in the grain before processing. The fortification is not a bonus, it is a partial, inadequate replacement for what the manufacturing process removed. This is the same paradox we looked at in episode 5. British bread is fortified with calcium, iron, niacin, and thiamine not because bread is naturally deficient in these nutrients, but because the Chorleywood bread process strips them out. Breakfast cereal follows identical logic. The consumer sees fortified with vitamins and iron and reads health. What they should read is so industrially degraded that it required artificial nutrient replacement to avoid being completely void. And even the fortification itself is questionable. The iron used in many cereal products is reduced iron, sometimes literally metallic iron filings. There's a widely shared demonstration where you run a magnet through crushed cereal and collect visible iron particles. While the food industry maintains that this iron is safe and bioavailable, research on iron bioavailability indicates that non-heme sources, particularly in the form of reduced iron, are significantly less well absorbed than the heme iron found in animal products, or the naturally occurring iron in whole grains, consumed with their full complement of cofactors. Synthetic vitamin sprays applied to the surface of extruded cereal pieces raise similar questions. Vitamins are most effectively absorbed when consumed as part of a whole food matrix, alongside the cofactors, enzymes, and fiber that aid their metabolism. Spraying isolated synthetic vitamins onto nutritionally depleted cereal and calling the result fortified is a triumph of labeling over substance. We need to talk about acrylamide, because a lot of people watching this will not have heard that word before. Acrylamide is a chemical compound formed when starchy foods are heated to high temperatures through a process known as the Maillard reaction. It is classified by the International Agency for Research on Cancer as a Group 2A carcinogen, meaning it is probably carcinogenic to humans, based on sufficient evidence of carcinogenicity in experimental animals and limited evidence in humans. The European Food Safety Authority confirmed in 2015 that dietary exposure to acrylamide at current levels indicates a concern for neoplastic effects, cancer-causing effects, and breakfast cereals, manufactured through high-temperature extrusion, are one of the primary dietary sources of acrylamide, alongside fried potato products, bread, and coffee. Commission regulation by the EU 2017/2158, which applied to UK food businesses from April of 2018, established benchmark levels for acrylamide in various food categories. For breakfast cereals produced under high temperature conditions, including toasted and gun-puffed products, the benchmark is 300 micrograms per kilogram. For other breakfast cereals, benchmarks range from 150 to 300 micrograms per kilogram, depending on the formulation. These are benchmark levels, not maximum limits. They are intended as performance indicators, and approximately 15% of cereal products tested across EU member states have historically exceeded them, with patchy enforcement. And here is the critical point for kids. Proportionately, a 5-year-old weighing 20 kilograms consuming a bowl of cereal containing acrylamide at the benchmark level receives a dose per kilogram of body weight approximately 3 to 4 times higher than an 80-kilogram adult consuming exactly the same product. Children are not small adults. They're developing organs. Their higher metabolic rate relative to body mass, their longer lifespan remaining over which cumulative exposure can build up. All of it makes them disproportionately vulnerable. And yet the benchmarks are set at population level, not adjusted for the age group that consumes the most cereal, the smallest people, eating the most of the most contaminated product. Let me give you the headline numbers on what the convergence of all of this is producing. In the 2023 to 24 academic year, 9.6% of reception-aged children aged 4 and 5 in England were classified as obese. By year 6, aged 10 and 11, that figure rises to 22.1%. Among year 6 children in the most deprived quintile, obesity prevalence reached 29.2%, more than double the 13% found in the least deprived areas. And the gap between deprived and affluent communities has widened, not narrowed, since 2009 to 2010. The NHS now spends approximately £6.5 billion per year treating obesity-related illness across all age groups. Type 2 diabetes in children and adolescents was so rare once it was not even routinely screened for. It's now a recognized and growing clinical entity in this country. The condition was literally named adult onset diabetes because it did not occur in children. It now does, and the mechanism is well understood. Chronic excess sugar consumption drives insulin resistance, which drives metabolic syndrome, which drives type 2 diabetes. A child consuming a high sugar cereal every morning, day after day, year after year, is running an experiment in metabolic damage with their own body as the test subject. Tooth decay, as I covered earlier, is the leading cause of elective hospital admission for children in England. The annual cost to the NHS of hospital tooth extractions for children was estimated at £33 million in 2019 to 2020. An estimated 60,000 school days are lost every year to hospital admissions for dental treatment, the overwhelming majority caused by sugar. And a 2024 umbrella review in the British Medical Journal found that higher ultra-processed food consumption was associated with increased risk of cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, mental health disorders, and all-cause mortality. The damage begins in childhood and compounds across a lifetime. Every bowl of high-sugar, extruded cereal served to a child is a deposit into a metabolic deficit account that will be drawn upon for decades. Now, the UK approach to all of this can be summarized in 3 words: voluntary, targets, delays. Voluntary targets, industry self-regulation, incremental restrictions that consistently arrive late and fall short. Compare and contrast with what other countries actually do. Chile, as I mentioned, has the most comprehensive food labeling and marketing regulations of any country. Mandatory black octagonal warning labels. No cartoon mascots on warning label products. Television advertising prohibited from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. Sale banned in schools and nurseries. A 25% reduction in sugary drink purchases within 2 years. Mexico adopted Chile's octagonal warning label model. They banned cartoon mascots on products carrying warning labels. Their consumer protection agency actively enforced compliance. France implemented Nutri-Score, a color-coded front-of-pack label from A in green, healthiest, to E in red, least healthy, providing immediate visual nutritional assessment. Scandinavian countries have long restricted advertising to children under 12. Sweden has banned television advertising directed at children altogether. In the UK, the government announced HFSS advertising restrictions on television and online, originally targeting products high in fat, sugar, and salt. Those restrictions have been repeatedly delayed under industry lobbying pressure. The voluntary sugar reduction program has produced meaningful reformulation in some products, but has failed to meet its overall targets. The traffic light labeling system remains voluntary, and many manufacturers, including Kellogg's, have historically used monochrome labeling schemes rather than Food Standards Agency's recommended red, amber, green system, reducing the efficacy of the scheme as a consumer information tool. And the contrast is genuinely stark. Countries that treat childhood nutrition as a public health imperative, subject to mandatory regulation and active enforcement, see measurable improvements. Countries that defer to industry self-regulation, voluntary commitments, and delayed implementation see exactly the outcome Britain is currently experiencing: rising childhood obesity, the emergence of pediatric type 2 diabetes, and industrial-scale dental decay. Now, the global breakfast cereal market is dominated by a small number of corporations. Kellogg's, now split into Kellanova, which was acquired by Mars in 2024, and WK Kellogg Co., and Cereal Partners Worldwide, which is a joint venture between Nestlé and General Mills. They control the majority of the branded cereal market in the UK and globally. These companies wield significant lobbying power, and they have consistently opposed or sought to delay mandatory regulation of their products. And the industry's most powerful weapon is not a product, it is not a mascot, it is a narrative. Breakfast is the most important meal of the day. This claim, now so deeply embedded in popular culture that it is treated as self-evident nutritional wisdom, is not the product of independent science. It is the product of cereal industry marketing, dating back to the early 20th century. Studies linking breakfast consumption to improved cognitive performance, better weight management, and better health outcomes have been extensively funded by cereal manufacturers themselves. A 2013 review in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that the evidence for a causal relationship between breakfast consumption and body weight was weak, with the supposed benefits often confounded by what's called the healthy user bias. People who eat breakfast tend to have generally healthier lifestyles, which makes it difficult to attribute health outcomes to breakfast itself rather than to the broader pattern. And the industry's engagement with public health policy is frankly a case study in regulatory capture. Cereal manufacturers fund nutrition research. They sponsor dietetic associations. They supply school breakfast programs. They participate in voluntary sugar reduction programs. And they sit on the advisory panels that shape the very policies intended to regulate them. And when regulation does arrive, as with the HFSS restrictions, it's met with legal challenge, lobbying for delay, and adaptation of marketing strategies to circumvent the intent of the restrictions while technically complying with their letter. Now, lest anyone think this episode is just doom and gloom, let me end with an alternative, because there is one, and it is genuinely simple. A genuinely healthy breakfast for a child does not require extrusion. It does not require fortification. It does not require cartoon mascots or a marketing budget. It requires whole food. Whole rolled oats, not extruded, not instant, soaked overnight or cooked as porridge. They provide fiber, B vitamins, iron, and slow-release carbohydrates in their natural food matrix with full bioavailability, without the nutrient destruction of extrusion, without added sugar. An egg from a free-range or pasture-raised hen provides complete protein, choline, vitamin D, B12, and essential fatty acids. Full-fat natural yogurt provides calcium, protein, and beneficial bacteria. Fresh or frozen fruit provides vitamin C, fiber, and natural sweetness. These foods are whole, minimally processed, nutritionally complete. They do not need to be fortified because they have not been stripped. And the cost argument, frequently deployed by the cereal industry itself, does not actually withstand any scrutiny. A kilogram of porridge oats costs less than £1 in most supermarkets. A kilogram of branded breakfast cereal costs between £3 and £6. Eggs cost approximately 20 to 30 pence each. A bowl of porridge with a boiled egg costs less than a bowl of Cocoa Pops and delivers incomparably more nutrition. The cereal industry has spent decades constructing the perception that boxed cereal is a convenient, affordable, nutritious choice. It is convenient, it's not affordable, especially relative to the alternatives, and it is not, by any honest nutritional standard, a healthy way to start a child's day. Countries with better child health outcomes than Britain do not feed their children extruded, sugar-coated grain for breakfast. Japanese children eat rice, miso soup, and fish. Scandinavian children eat rye bread, cheese, eggs, and yogurt. These breakfasts are not exotic. They are not expensive. They are simply what a society looks like when it has not outsourced its children's first meal of the day to the processed food industry. So a bowl of children's breakfast cereal is not a single product failure. It is the convergence points of every single systemic failure I've documented in this series. Ultra-processed grain, contaminated water, industrialized milk, pesticide residues, excessive sugar, and relentless marketing aimed at the people least equipped to resist it. Addressing any of these in isolation while leaving the others intact will not protect children. The entire system requires reform. So here are the specific demands. 1. Mandatory front-of-pack warning labels following the Chilean octagonal model for all products classified as HFSS. 2. Cartoon mascots and child-directing marketing prohibited on any product carrying a warning label. Tony the Tiger, Coco the Monkey, the Honey Monster, all of them. 3. Voluntary sugar reduction targets replaced with mandatory enforceable limits with meaningful consequences for non-compliance. 4. Maximum residue levels for pesticides on cereal crops reassessed based on cumulative child exposure, not individual compound safety margins designed for adults. 5. Acrylamide benchmarks replaced with mandatory maximum limits, with separate lower thresholds for products predominantly consumed by children. 6. School breakfast programs prohibited from accepting branded supply from manufacturers of HFSS products. Parents deserve to know what's in the bowl. Children deserve better than the bowl they've been given. And the companies that have spent 70 years marketing nutritionally degraded, sugar-saturated, pesticide-contaminated, industrially extruded grain to children under the cover of cartoon mascots and vitamin claims deserve to be held to account. So the next time you reach for a box of cereal, turn it around. Read the ingredients list. Look at the sugar content. Consider the extrusion process that created it, the pesticides sprayed on the grain it was made from, the milk it will be served with, and the water it was all washed in. And then ask yourself whether this is really what you want to feed your child for breakfast every morning for the next decade. The cereal industry has had 70 years to answer that question honestly. It has chosen not to. It is time for the rest of us to start asking. If you found this episode useful, share it. Send it to a parent. Send it to a grandparent who buys the cereal for grandkids. Send it to anyone who has ever stood in the breakfast aisle and felt vaguely that something wasn't right, because it's not. And the only way to change it is to start saying so, loudly, publicly, and politically. This is the 7th episode in a series examining what Britain puts into its food, its water, and its people, and what it's costing us. Please do like, subscribe, and share as far as you can. The time for change is now. Thank you.